All right, we're all set. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on behalf of Contact North. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's webinar, Approaching Critical AI Literacy for Students and Faculty with Compassion, Nurturing Agency, Recognizing and Mitigating Bias. I am Sarah Govro, Director of teachonline.ca and of the online learning news at Contact North, and I will be your host today. So to begin with, I would like to start with a provincial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that Contact North work and the work of our community partners takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We are grateful to be able to live and work on these lands. We express our gratitude to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who have cared for these territories since time immemorial and who continue to strengthen communities across Ontario. So just a few quick notes before we start. So we're using Zoom webinar today. That means participants' microphones and cameras will remain off. The chat will remain open, but please do remember to select everyone in the drop-down menu when posting so we can all see your comments. If you do have any questions, kindly use the Q&A tool located at the bottom of your screen. We'll have time at the end of the session to address some of those. You can also upvote any questions that resonate with you by clicking the thumbs up icon. Live captioning is available. Simply click the closed caption icon at the bottom of the screen. And after the webinar, I will post the recording and presentation slides, teachonline.ca. And I'll share that link in the chat shortly, but you'll also receive the link 24 hours after the session has concluded through an email. So that's it for me. On to our main event. I'd like to welcome Dr. Maha Bali, who is Professor of Practice at the Center of Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. So thank you, Maha, and thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
Thank you for having me. I always start by saying Assalamu alaikum. This means peace be upon you, and it works for any time zone, which works really great for these kinds of meetings. And I will very soon ask how you're all feeling. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. And actually, I clicked on the Brookings link, and so it sort of took me away from my slides, so I had to go find them again. So I'll be talking to you again today about approaching critical AI literacy for both students and faculty members with compassion. And this picture on the side here is something that my daughter created with AI early days that I really think is cute. It's supposed to be, she actually prompted it to give a cute sphinx. And I like it because it's cute. If you ever come to Egypt, I'd want to like make a 3D printing of this and give it to you as a souvenir. My slides are Creative Commons by non-commercial, so feel free to reuse any parts of the slides as long as you attribute them to me and don't sell them. And I just want to start with, you've all said it where you are, so you don't have to say where you are again, but the sleepless in Seattle is just how do you feel and where are you? So let me know how you're feeling right now. Tell me in the chat. I'll be using the chat a lot, so I hope you'll be up for it. Obviously, if you're multitasking or whatever, no pressure. There are 200 people here, so. All right, so people are feeling cold and great and rested and excited and curious and optimistic and content and contradiction. Cold, concern, yeah. Excited to be listening, getting ready, feeling ready, grateful, enthusiastic, sad and frustrated. The state of the world is sad and frustrating, as is some aspects of AI as well, so I can understand. Tired, glad, excited to learn more. Relaxed and looking forward to the presentation. Yes. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. And I hope that if you're tired, that this gives you energy without exhausting you. So please don't feel any pressure to do more than you're willing to do today. Make sure you have like your hot drink or your fluffy blanket or whatever you need to be present with us today. Thank you, everybody. All right. It's not very cold in Cairo today, but we've had some cold days, but nothing like what you get in Canada, of course. Okay, so what I'm hoping for today is to do a little bit of checking in and listening to you. And I'll be doing this throughout the session, but a little bit at the beginning as well. I'll explain what I mean by compassionate design approach and how I would apply it to AI. I'll share my critical AI literacy model and creative ways that I teach it or that I've seen people teach it. And I want to stop and recognize the potential harm and bias in AI, not only potential, also historical, and talk about centering and nurturing human agency. And I'll share with you a matrix called the Learning Equity Matrix, which is quite intuitive, but I don't think a lot of people do it. So I'd like to share it as a way that you might want to think about what you're doing or help your colleagues. And I want to hear your key takeaways towards the end. And then there'll be time for questions, inshallah. But you can ask questions anytime. I can follow the chat while I'm talking, don't worry. My version of a land acknowledgement is we don't do land acknowledgements in Egypt. But I do want to say and remind us all that coloniality survives colonialism. So I know some of you live in places that are settler colonialist places, but coloniality affects all of us. It's alive in books, in criteria for academic performance, cultural patterns, self-image of people, what we consider common sense, our aspirations for self, the entire modern experience. And so we are all actually modern subjects and we breathe coloniality all the time and every day. The fact that I am speaking to you in English is what empowers me to be able to reach so many people from so many different parts of the world, north, south, east, west, but is also a kind of a manifestation of coloniality. And of course, AI is a manifestation of coloniality and colonialist knowledge, right? But I also want to make a disclaimer of trying to create a space that is not an AI shaming space. I want to hold space for and give each other grace and give ourselves grace to hold multiple views about AI. I'm not sure why my screen like this a bit bigger than my screen, but anyway, I'm just, focusing on that we can have multiple views about AI. Some of us can be very excited about AI, and I want to invite you to listen to people who have big concerns because of ethical issues. And I also understand that some people are very strong in their rejection about AI, and I want to respect your reasons for this. And I also want to encourage you to listen to why other people might feel otherwise. So I just want to create a space where don't make anybody feel bad about themselves. Please be open to listening to something different than what you already believe. And this is hard because there's a lot of very strong feelings about AI. I also want to acknowledge the work of someone who's based in Canada right now in the University of Victoria, Vanessa Andreotti, but she's originally from Brazil and she's half Indigenous. And she talks about how it's up to us, and she calls them emergent intelligences, not just artificial intelligence. She says it's up to us how we choose to steward it. And this will shape not only its future, but our own. And we can choose to steward AI through a paradigm of extraction and exploitation, and therefore we will accelerate our own demise. But if we decide to guide AI toward a relational rationality rooted in accountability, kindness, and care, it may in turn help scaffold humanity to embody some of those qualities, offering us a pathway to face modernity's hallucinations and the truths it has conditioned us to deny. And if you haven't read her work, or there's also an online course about meta-relational approach to AI at University of Victoria that you can do online. And I did it last semester, and it was really, really good. So free marketing for them because it was a really good course. These are the links to my slides. And for those of you who are watching this recorded later, these are open for commenting. So if anybody wants to ask a question, and everybody who's here, obviously, beyond today, you can just go into the slides and put a comment there if you want to continue the conversation or ask me something about what's on my slides. And I love that when that happens. I'll see the notification and I'll respond to you. So it's bit.ly/uppercase B and then Bali, AI in uppercase, and then literacy, and then uppercase CN for Contact North. So it's a meaningful link. It's just longer than a short link. All right. So for those of you who are in the room, tell me what you do for work. Just one or two words, like you teach, or you're a librarian. I'm an educational developer, so my main job is to support other people with their teaching. So similar to instructional designers, we have a lot of these here today. Okay, and we have some librarians, some professors, yeah. But I also teach a course, and I find it really important to be teaching as well as doing this work, because then I can actually understand how people are feeling right now with like reading a lot of AI generated stuff and learning a lot from my students from the ways that they use AI, as well as learning from faculty in my institution about how they use it, resist it, what they like, what they dislike. All right. Okay, and we have PhD students and grad students as well. Yes, that's great. And we have several language teachers, and I'm seeing several librarians. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And lots of nurses, actually, I've noticed people who work in nursing. Yes, and lots of instructional design and educational development. Thank you and welcome, everybody. And online course developers. Thank you so much. And some people seem to be like AI is part of your specialty, so I'm expecting you all to help me out with with things here. All right, and so in terms of attitudes towards AI, this is actually inspired by Vanessa Andreotti's work. Through a colleague of mine called Teresa Distribek, we were doing a book circle about Burnout from Humans, which is written by Vanessa and her AI trained Aiden Cinnamon Tea. And it's about asking which of these attitudes towards AI best represents you. And if you use Slido, there's a QR code at the top, which with your phone you can take, or you can just open a browser and type slido.com, and then the the code is 1149527. And the options, you can choose more than one. I'm saying choose up to two, but if you feel like more than one very strongly, you can select whichever ones make sense to you. So do you feel like you're more of an instrumentalization wizard? You'd wield AIs for any purpose, playful chaotic, skeptical pragmatist, capitalist extractor, shutdown brigade, footprint alarmist, data guardian, you're worrying about privacy. Okay. If you're having problems with Slido, feel free to type in the chat. Or if you're feeling something completely outside of this list, also feel free to type in the chat. Yeah, so if it's other, what is the other? I'm curious about what the other is. Let me know in the chat. All right, so about 36 people have voted so far, and skeptical pragmatist is the highest, and that is often the case when I have a local or an international group of educators. That's what I tend to find a lot. A mix of playful, chaotic, and skeptical pragmatist. Yeah. Yeah, tech bros in power, taking advantage of the global south. So capitalist extractor, no? The tech bros in power thing, and extractivist. I think that may be similar to yours. Footprint resource cost alarmist. So yeah, right. Skeptical pragmatist as well. Okay. Thank you. And then playful chaotic is the second thing that's getting like 44% of people. Now 45. And that's, I'm seeing more and more of people there. I think there's a lot more new AI that lends itself to more of this. And so maybe that's why that's happening more and more. And I guess fewer people are scared of it now. And then I'm happy to see that there's a lot of also data guardians who are worried about privacy. A lot of people say if we install our own local LLMs that aren't connected to the internet or not the large ones, then that would solve some of the footprint issues, the carbon footprint issues, and the privacy issues, but there are still other issues. We have around 20% instrumentalization, which, wow, we're 96%, 96 people now already. So still the skeptical pragmatist is the highest. And I'm happy to see people who are concerned for the environment, and 16% are footprint alarmists. Not enough people who are. Oh, I see what you mean. When I said the capitalist extractor, this is people who would use it to make profit, not people who critique it because of the way it's capitalist extractor. So I see why someone wrote it in the chat as a separate thing. Yeah, I should change that. I should add it. And then the human-centric purists, I see 20% who are worried about the threat to human creativity and sacredness. And I also see a lot of people worried about cognitive demise, like people just, especially with young people, if you teach young people or undergrads, you're worried that their cognitive development might be affected. But they're only 4% of people who are shut down brigade. Yeah. Okay, and I see people say mixtures and talking about learning activities for adult literacy learners. Yeah. Okay, and a number one concern. Oh, hi, Susanna. Number one concern in Scandinavia is the data guardian aspect, yes. And that sounds right. And generally, I think in Europe, there's a lot more interest in this than in the US, for example. Probably Canada also has more of an interest in that kind of thing than the US usually. All right, so I don't know if anybody's been to Egypt recently, but we've just had the opening of our Grand Egyptian Museum. If you come, you got to visit. It's huge and it's very well done. And I saw this statue of an ancient Egyptian goddess. Her name is Sekhmet, and it says that she's the goddess of war, destruction, and plague. And she was also worshipped as the protector of the king and goddess of healing. And I saw this and I texted one of my friends who's a professor of Egyptology. And she told me, yes, that's what she is. I'm like, how can she be all of that at the same time? Like goddess of war and destruction, but also the goddess of healing? And she told me, depends on her mood, which was very interesting to see. But I saw this and I felt like AI reminds me of this. Like, some of us see AI as like, yeah, it's gonna, spoil the world, it's gonna cause so much trouble, and other people are seeing it as like it's gonna help solve problems, it's gonna help with medical care, and it's gonna help in so many other ways. But I also saw the part about protector of the king and thinking that maybe it protects those who are privileged, but maybe harming those who are marginalized or underprivileged. So that's something to keep in mind. And also a reminder in general that many companies that claim to be doing ethical AI and using AI for good have also been using AI themselves to support war crimes at worst, and maybe just surveillance and exploitation of labor in a more routine kind of way. And they normalize this kind of thing. So that's important to keep in mind. Yeah, true. It's a lot like humans, contradictory characteristics. But you think gods usually they're very extreme in a very particular characteristic, ancient Egyptian gods at least, and goddesses, they're usually focused, and Greek gods as well. Like they're usually focused on particular things. Yes, so the next question is what's a metaphor for AI you would use? Um, Victoria, I pasted the links to the slides up here. Hopefully you'll see it. Oh, Brian, you're interested in or concerned about AI civilizational impact. That's so interesting. All right, metaphors you have for AI. Tell me, what metaphors do you use or do you hear people use about AI? This is, by the way, one of the activities I do with my students, and they tend to enjoy the process of brainstorming it. I want to hear yours. Wicked problem. Hi, Nick. A guy in grad school who hadn't answered everything was always wrong. Thinking partner co-pilots. Alien. Personal assistant, work assistant, fantastically evil, soulless god. Nancy Google, Pandora's box. Guy only with the gas pedal, untrustworthy friend, bot, wonky robot, supportive agent. I should have done a word cloud for this one. Jackie Chan, sort of Damocles, supportive agent, tireless assistant, thinking partner cannot ignore without feeling bad that I don't take their advice. You can ignore, but you'd feel bad if you didn't take advice. Terminator, overconfident teenager, hell. Instructor easily describe as like driving a car, it'll get you there faster, but at some costs. Jinn, I love Jinn. I love that one. I loved untrustworthy. Okay, like untrustworthy. Indigenous elders told me once that AI is like a canoe paddle. It can be used as a weapon or a tool to propel forward. It's all in the intent. I love that. Amazing interns. Skynet, yeah, that's from Terminator 2, right? A thought partner for specific tasks. Mad scientist's helpful assistant. So less discipline specific expert assistant. That's a very interesting, less discipline specific, but expert in a way. Unreliable narrator. Very interesting. Thank you all for those. Puppy always wants to please, always eager. Perplexity. That's also the name of one of the of the tools. So thank you all. So this idea of metaphors came from my mom originally, when she heard she's a medical doctor, nothing to do with anything, but she's, oh, I see mansplainer and almost intelligent. I like that. My mom said ChatGPT reminds her of fast food, and I thought that's such a good metaphor for AI. Fast food. You don't know how it got there. It, sometimes you need it because it's fast, it's useful, but sometimes it can be bad for you, or too much of it can be bad for you nutritionally, things like that. Welcome to those who just came in. And so I got together with Anuj Gupta and Anna Mills in the US and Yasser Atif here in Egypt, and we co-authored this paper, Assistant Parator Colonizing Loudspeaker, and using ChatGPT metaphors as a way to develop critical AI literacies. And when you look at each of these kinds of metaphors, some of them are more human than others. We looked at like 10 different that we think are most useful are, human or semi-human or non-human, and whether they're showing a functional or more positive use of AI, critical, more negative use, or a rhetorical view of AI sees multiple directions, dimensions. So a genie and a magician, like not fully human maybe, or human-ish, but you can see like how a genie can sometimes give you your wish, but sometimes it really messes up. Magicians can be actually good for you or bad for you. Sometimes they'll do good magic or black magic. But people who said things like assistants usually mean it in a positive way. Pahlawi, for anyone who speaks Arabic, is an Egyptian word to talk about someone who pretends to know stuff that they really don't know. So a lot like what Karen said as a grad student who always pretends to know everything but really doesn't. And things like calculator and autocomplete that fewer people are using now are functional but non-human. Stochastic parrot, very famous one that's more critical view of AI. Uh, yeah. I saw the half empty glass. That would be kind of like two-edged sword, maybe half empty, half full, kind of thing. And then, things like fast food, plastic surgery. Colonizing loudspeaker is actually one we came up with for this paper in the way that AI reproduces colonialist knowledge. Clicking on Slido takes you to the Google Slides. No, this link is the link to the slides. The Slido was a different QR code, but we're not using it anymore. So, all right. So let's talk about compassionate learning design. The original, before I go into it, I want to hear from you. What part of your teaching or work brings you the most joy? So I'm going to listen to you in the chat again. Collaborating with others, helping students gain new skills, collaboration, student growth, students building connections, creative elements, and human relations. In general, collaborating, moments, aha moments, yes. Providing one-on-one support, planning students. I can't read as fast as you're writing, but connections between peer students, aspiring others, improving things, engaging students. The engagement's coming up a lot. Helping students recognize their gifts, student feedback after a course, supporting students. All right, so much here about collaboration and seeing aha moments for students and face-to-face interactions, critical thinking and helping with that, helping to train Muslim learners that fuse faith with leadership pedagogy, empowering creativity in others, connecting with new educators, interaction with students and seeing them learn. Some people talk about discovering new stuff. Seeing people share their passion. Yeah, I love working with faculty and seeing them share their passions as well. Challenging learners, dialogue and discussing developing new ideas, improving processes and practices, working toward a just, equitable learning environment that elevates learning. I love that, Hannah. Yes, making students curious. Thank you so much. Seeing students who have previously had unsuccessful experiences experience success. That's beautiful. Thank you all for sharing that. I love that so much of that is about human connection, and I think AI doesn't take that away from us. I do have concerns about ways in which sometimes we think about replacing like teaching assistants with AI and how you're not just giving students answers to questions, they might be missing out on the potential human connection that they can later make with that TA to become a mentor in the future. But I can see that you all are valuing your connection with your students and their connection to each other. And it's just important as we go forward not to let AI interrupt that. Like, whatever you do, remember those things that matter to you most and make sure that you keep doing them. And I think to be compassionate towards teachers is very important in this moment. And I was recently on an email thread talking about just being compassionate towards those who are maybe grieving something due to the existence of AI. So, is there something that you are grieving due to the existence of AI that you have named, or maybe you haven't named it yet? This is also inspired by a conversation with actually Aidan Cinnamon Tea, who's Vanessa Andreotti's AI. So, what is something you're grieving right now? You may or may not have named it now that AI is around us. Tell me in the chat. Challenges to your sense of professional purpose, tech-free spaces. You can always tell people to leave their phone or put it in the bag and just focus with you, I think. Oh, an artist who doesn't want to be an artist anymore. I don't think, oh, I don't think there's no point anymore. Also, students having a high moment pushing through the challenging writing work. Yeah, they want to do the easy way and they don't want to make the effort, which is where the learning happens, the over-reliance. Yeah. Um, yeah, students using their own mind, seeing so many, yeah, AI generated work makes reading student work really difficult sometimes. It's a shortcut without the exploration. Yeah. So they're missing the journey and just getting to the destination, which means they haven't learned from anything along the destination sometimes. Professional identity feels unmoored. Kate Bowles uses that term a lot. And yeah, I can imagine how that feels. students replacing their own thinking by AI, too much dependence. And the worry is for younger and younger people, because the older we are, the less likely we're going to fully depend on it because we grew up without it. But those who are now in high school, for example, we're gonna start seeing this more and more. Trust, yes, the loss of trust between teachers and students, and just always questioning whether something is AI generated. And every time you read something, even emails now between people, right? Student learning too hard on AI, leaning too hard for writing, harder design assessments to make student learning visible. Yes. Class reflections, other assessments that don't work anymore. Yeah, like you think you came up with some really good assessments and now they don't work. Erosion of academic tenacity, trust in student submissions again. A time when there was less hype in the news about AI being bombarded. Yeah, the hype itself. Hi, Nicola. The hype is quite annoying actually because it makes lay people, like we in education, have to deal with it anyway because it's around us. But lay people having this overhyped sense of what AI can do and is, and because it says intelligent, they believe it and they trust it in ways that we know that you shouldn't. The division is harmful, right? The very, very big division between AI enthusiasts and people who are AI cautious or AI resistant. Students' wrong approach. Yeah, when at some point students start to use AI quite well, but some of them anyway. But when they use it really badly, it's really sad to see the dependence, the lack of critical thinking. Blessing to have AIs, the learners can use it to learn a lot. So for some learners, and if we can support them or mentor them, and some of them reach this on their own, they do figure out how to use it in a way that does support their learning and doesn't interrupt it, but not everyone is there. Being able to trust what I see and read is true, yes. In the news, right, the amount of deep fakes and kind of things that we're seeing now is huge. Um, and some good ideas for examination do not work due to AI. Yes, that's true. I agree. Proctoring tools and false positives. The false positives, oh my God, with proctoring tools, with AI dissectors, this is horrendous. This is disappearing curiosity. And a lot of people talked about how curiosity is a very important thing. So if AI is diminishing that, we need to figure out how to bring it back. That it encourages cheating. Well, I don't think students think they're cheating when they're using it as often, but yeah, they're then making the effort to learn something, I think, for themselves. Again. Okay. There's some students who still burn the midnight oil. That's true. But would they? Simpler times when people would do that instead of going to Gen AI for a quick answer. Yeah. Old school study practices for fostering memory and critical thinking. Wow. I'm going to download the chat hopefully later to read everything in more detail. I just need to move on, but I really love this and I am saving the chat even right now just to make sure I don't miss this. The struggle is so important to reach the aha moment. So a lot of you who talked about how important that is for you, that's important. There's also a difference between, yeah, the complex intelligence and silly mistakes that AI does. That's true. And ruined relationships between colleagues, authors who may use AI to assist research, ethical implications. Yeah. So when you're working in a group, it's really important to discuss this. Yeah. And someone says, as more people become dependent on AI, who's going to control the bias and what gets sent out? That's also a very big problem. And so why is it that students use AI as a shortcut or as an unauthorized source of help? So there are faculty who allow their students to use AI, or they encourage them, or they mentor them through it. I think students, some of them think about efficiency. That's true. They think it's just going to be faster. Fear of being wrong, need to have grades. Yeah, they think the AI is better than them. It will give them better grades, so they're doing it. It's their second language, so they can't write as well, and they see the AI and looks better. They think they'll get a better grade. They're lazy. They're time constraints. I don't think most students are lazy actually, but they do want to get something done faster so they can do other things. So there's time pressure, and they have other things to do. So this will help get it done. It's so easy to find the information you need, or they think they have found it. Lack of confidence in their own ability to do better. Pressure to do well. Yeah, they think the benefits outweigh the costs, but they don't realize what the costs are, right? Overwhelmed by other coursework and the rewards, priorities are elsewhere. They feel like it expands their learning. They trust it more than their own thinking. Yes. It's readily available, makes the work easier. Their own lack of knowledge, so they don't realize and they don't know how to do it on their own. Everyone else is doing it. Right. That's a big one, right? It's what everybody else is doing. Lack of commitment to the work. Maybe the work that we're asking them to do feels irrelevant to them. They don't see the value in it. Um, a lot of them don't know about the hallucinations, honestly, or the environmental and privacy risks. That's true. Um, yeah, her teen tells her you lose out if you don't use it. My daughter's still kind of resisting, even though I actually got her experimenting with it pretty early. She disliked it pretty early and she still doesn't like it. Just haven't been properly taught how to use it properly. That's also true. confusing messages across the school. Yes, so every faculty member is telling them something different, and I think it should be okay because we have different everything. Why should our AI policies be all the same? Yes, I think the aspect of assessment that Nick Baker is saying here, assessment being inauthentic, irrelevant, unaligned, that would drive someone to use it. Like, what I will use AI for something I don't think is worth my time a lot of times, right? But definitely this lack of confidence in their own ability to do something gets there. Yes, apathy sometimes. Yes, students sometimes in higher education are feeling apathetic, maybe high school as well, with subjects they don't like or don't care about. Yeah, or maybe they're busy, they have to work to pay for education, so they don't have as much time to do the things. Thank you all for sharing that. And I think it's important to talk to our students, our particular students, because in my context, for example, a lot of students don't work, but in others, there might be people who have certain things that are happening. And there are assignments that feel irrelevant to them, like people are saying. Or sometimes it's not intentional when they're using it because they just have a plugin for Quillbot and they don't even realize that's AI. Sometimes now Microsoft Word has a rewrite this for me thing. There are things like this that are becoming ubiquitous and it's harder to avoid. I agree. So it's important to understand why they use AI or how they use AI and then decide together, I think, with them. I co-authored this blog post with a former student of mine of why students use AI. And so you can take a look at what we both said. This was a couple of years ago. I have different things that I do now. It's linked in the slides, and my thing is hanging up right now, so I can't put the link for you, but I will just move on. The playful confessions approach is one that I love, and I've tried it with my students, and it's really useful. They were actually assigned a reading to annotate, and when I was looking at their annotations, which usually wouldn't be using AI, I started to see something like a similar trend in the way some of them answered it. And so I gave them the grades for what they'd done, and then we sat in a circle. We always sit in a circle, and I said, and we had the discussion about the reading even, and I could tell from the discussion that some of them had read properly and some of them had not. And I said, so let's have a playful confessions. You've already got your grade. Now let me know how you used AI to help you with the reading and with the annotation. And then every single student shared how they used AI. And there were 3 who didn't use AI at all. And you could tell from the way they answered the annotations. And then some of them really didn't do any work. They just let the AI pick some quotes and write comments on the quotes without reading the article at all. And you could tell in the discussion that they had no idea what we were talking about. But then there were other students who used AI in really intelligent ways that actually helped them. And they shared their process of someone put the article into Google Notebook LM and started listening to it as a podcast. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute. This is an annotation assignment. I have to put comments on particular quotes and not just understand the article overall. So they went back again and they used Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever to pick out some quotes for them. But then once it picked out the quotes, they also read a summary of the article so they'd understand what it was about because it was a longish article. And then they wrote their own reflections on the quotes. And so they were still doing the assignment-ish, like they didn't read the article, but they did understand the general idea of the article and they wrote their own reflections. So they were personal reflections written by them. They just used AI to help them pick out quotes. And then there was another student who did something really interesting, which is she wrote her reflection and then she asked the AI to help her make the reflection deeper and more personal. And she asked the AI to prompt her to keep writing it in a more deep way. And her reflection was really good because it was her reflection. She was just using the AI to help her do a better reflection. And so that's one of the things that works really well. Having that conversation, the students at the end of that class reflected on how useful this was. It was useful to them to realize the ones who were using AI poorly, that they had used AI poorly, that it was very obvious to me and to others. And then they listened to other ways of using AI and thought, oh, well, that's a very smart way of using AI. I could consider doing that. And that I would have loved everyone to read the entire article, honestly, because it's a beautiful article and they missed out by not reading it, the ones who didn't read it. But if they weren't going to read it and they were going to do something else, there are still ways of reading differently that will still allow you to learn and to reflect personally and everything, versus people who just do everything with AI and give you like a vanilla, bland type of thing. So the other thing, speaking of vanilla, is the cake analogy, which I've written about. And what I say is, and this is a quick question to all of you, who bakes from scratch? Do you bake from scratch or do you use cake mix or do you not bake at all? And I ask this question to my students, and there is usually a very few people in the room who bake from scratch. And that usually because not everyone likes to bake, not everybody knows how to bake, not everybody succeeds when they start baking, and not everybody has the ingredients, the equipment, right? But like if you have a child who is gluten intolerant or something, you're probably baking at home because you want to make sure there's no gluten anywhere near that cake, right? But then if you're someone, there are reasons why people use cake mix sometimes. Sometimes they're in a hurry, and sometimes they don't have all the ingredients. Sometimes they can't get it right on their own, but the cake mix is a good support for them. It's like a scaffold. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes the ingredients are too expensive, right? You couldn't afford them. And the thing is, if you watch some of these baking shows like Nailed It or something, they usually give them cake mix because they want them to focus on decorating the cake. So you don't want to waste time getting the proportions right, but you want to focus on the decoration. I'm not a decorator, so I like making the cake myself, and I don't usually decorate it at all. But if I was a cake decorator, I wouldn't be focused too much on the cake itself. I could just get a cake mix, add a few things to it, and then do the most of the time on the decoration. And then some people are really, really bad at cakes altogether and they'll just buy it, right? And buying it is like contract cheating, buying it from someone. But if we think about both the students and the educators, if the educators think about their own learning outcomes, is my learning outcome that students are going to become bakers themselves? Are they going to open their own bakery, therefore they need to learn from scratch? Or am I teaching a cake decorating course? Or am I teaching them to become wedding planners? And if they're wedding planners, then the wedding planner doesn't have to make the cake themselves, they can give the cake away. Now, the AI part comes in that I think AI is kind of like using cake mix because it gives you like a template to work with if you give it instructions. But you still have to add something to it. Otherwise, then you're creating something that's like a Twinkie, and it's like a very low quality cake that you would give kids just to get them going, but it's not a quality work. But there are things that we are expert in so much, and we need to be able to know it very well and very deeply. And as students, they need to know if I'm going to become an architect or an engineer, even if in the future I might use AI for certain things, I still need to be able to do these things from scratch in order to create the cake mixes for other people to use, or in order to create a totally new type of thing, totally new type of cake that nobody's ever going to have seen before, because AI won't be able to do that. AI will only be able to mix up things that already exist, but not create totally new ones. Um, so this resonates with a lot of educators, and it also resonates with students for them to make the decision themselves about, if I used AI for this, would I be losing some very basic learning related to my development as a human being, or to my development as an engineer, or as a historian, or as a marketeer? Whatever they're studying, is this a very basic aspect of what I need to know to be able to do what I do well? And I tell them, even if I saw someone talking about how students use AI because they think they're going to use it in the job market, but there are certain skills you need to know how to do without AI in order to be able to use AI well, in order to assess whether AI has done them well or not. I'm originally a computer scientist. I know how to create neural networks and machine learning and things like that. And I sometimes use AI right now to do code for me. And it's JavaScript, it's very simple code. But if I didn't know anything about coding at all, and it did something wrong, I could keep telling it to try to fix it. This is what they call vibe coding. But right now, I can just go in and fix it manually myself in 1 second because I understand what went wrong. And I know which parts of it are what, and I can manage it. If I had no idea at all about how to do coding at all, it must be really hard. It must be much harder to deal with it when it makes mistakes. Of course, when it does well, it's great, but it's not always going to do exactly what you want, and you need to be able to know a little bit about that to be able to fix it. And same thing also with, yeah, exactly. Like with a calculator, nobody gives kids a calculator before they learn how to do plus or minus and multiplication basics, because you need to be able to tell this number looks off, Like same way with like accountants, they use Excel sheets, right? Or more advanced tools, but they need to have a good sense for numbers first in order to then be able to use an Excel sheet and be trusted with the numbers that come out of it. And so I think that's the same for any kind of automation, really, and especially with AI. I wouldn't completely trust it with something I know nothing about. Medical doctors get really upset when people use it. They used to get upset when you used like WebMD, but WebMD was even more credible than AI. But like with medical diagnosis, for example, like it can make things up. How much do you know to be able to differentiate, right? So the compassionate learning design, Nicola Pallet, my co-author, is with us today, and Daniela Gashago in South Africa. And our compassionate learning design approach is a general approach. It's not specifically about AI, but we also developed it with AI. And we're sort of talking about the importance of centering justice um, as the outcome that we're desiring, the fruit of our tree, right? That we have to have care, we have to have participation in the process, and overall, hopefully, we develop a compassionate learning design practice that promotes social justice. And so the participation aspect is the most important aspect, I think, when dealing with AI right now, is how much um, agency students have over how AI gets used and doesn't get used. So this model is inspired, this diagram is inspired by Nanwai Pihana, who is Maori in New Zealand. And it was originally about Indigenous evaluation and coming from the West, but think about it as teacher and student. So if we're empathetic towards students, we think we know what's good for them, so we give guidelines to them. We tell them, we decide, we impose on them, they have no agency. This is how you're going to use AI, this is how you're not going to use AI. But then we could do something with a little bit more agency for them, where we say, oh, you could use Gemini or ChatGPT. So they have a choice over which tool, but then we're still telling them how to use it. But we could co-create guidelines with them. So that's the one in the middle. There's more learner agency here, and the teacher is part of it, but the students are also part of the decision making, which I highly encourage you to do if you've never done it before. And then there's something else which can be even further than doing it with the students, but letting the students come up with their own guidelines with the teacher just standing on the side. It's difficult in if you're in a situation where this institution has to be accredited and it's a learning institution, you have to give certification or something. The teacher probably does have a say, but let students try to decide for themselves and just listen and just approve and maybe teach them a bit of critical AI literacy first before you ask them to make those decisions. And then there's this element of as and let them do what they want to do, and let them decide the guidelines for themselves. It's important for this to happen sort of collectively in the sense to be fair to everybody so that it's not like some people going off on their own. But there's a sense of them developing their own agency and their own ability to assess whether AI is harming them or hurting them. And the more I give students the freedom to make those decisions, the less I see them using AI poorly and inappropriately because they learn to be responsible for it by having that responsibility rather than being told do this and don't do that. And you know, one way to do it if you're thinking about AI specifically is this diagram here. And think also, of course, those of us who are educational developers, you pretty much know by now that you probably can't tell people, educators, whether or not they can do an AI policy in a particular way or another. So you can only support them to come up with one that's useful for them. And so think about, if we think about the higher levels here, the by and the as, uh, if they become familiar enough with AI, they can decide the criteria for appropriate use of AI for each of their assignments together, and then they make the agreement together and we sign off on that. Or it can even be them deciding on the criteria without us at all and just reflecting and letting us know how they've done it. And just encouraging transparency and things like this. I'm just looking at the chat. Yeah, the models are in the CLD paper. Yeah. Oh, online asynchronous courses, Karen, this is a whole other direction because you have no other way to assess their learning. Like in my courses, I see them face to face. And so I have a lot of oral conversations. I have so much asynchronous online learning. You need to find some a lot of times you're going to have to figure out some offline synchronous way to assess their learning in test centers or even oral conversations. Now they can use AI really quickly to answer them. My husband is a surgeon, and during rounds he says the students are answering in a really weird way that is very fluent in English but very wrong. And he thinks they're using ChatGPT like even for synchronous oral semi-formal assessment, formative assessment. So I think that's going to be a huge thing for fully online learning is and like the problem with online learning is also like agentic AI agents can go in and do quizzes and do discussion forums. It's a mess. Um, so my critical AI literacy model, which I haven't talked about a lot, and I think I'm almost running out of time actually. Let me see what time it is. Yeah, I'm almost running out of time. So I'll go through this a little bit quickly, but you have all the resources in the slides, and I'll put a link to my slides at the end. For me, the important thing is to critical is not just about critique and skepticism. It's also subscribing to like critical theory, critical pedagogy, developing this awareness of social justice issues and cultivating learners' disposition to redress them, to recognize power issues at play, and to always question whenever we hear about AI, it's neither inevitable, beneficial, or transformative in a straightforward way in education. We need to keep thinking of it as contested, controversial, continue having these discussions and public deliberation and ongoing oversight. If any possible benefits are to be realized or any of the substantial risks are to be addressed, we need to stop dismissing people who have critiques of AI in education, honestly. It's important for people to understand how it works. And honestly, I think that understanding how it works um, already helps people understand the concept of hallucinations and why AI might make mistakes and the probabilistic approach, and that it learns from the data it gets. And automatically, if you are from a marginalized group whose knowledge is generally not valued in the world, you will automatically realize that your values and your knowledge and your approach to knowledge is not what the internet is full of. It's not what AI has been trained on, so it won't come out of it very well. And that will help you recognize inequalities and biases and the ways historically AI has shown bias. Facial recognition has shown bias against darker skin. In the criminal justice system, whenever it's been used, it has shown biases and reproduced the biases of human judges, especially racial bias in places like the US and things like this. So those are things that we need to acknowledge right away. And I think the problem is if someone isn't themselves very aware of biases, if someone doesn't understand what unconscious bias is, they won't understand why AI is reproducing implicit bias. And if they are not the recipients of bias, if you are a dominant person in your context, you don't understand how harmful bias is because it doesn't directly harm you. And so your sensitivity to this is lower. So we need to raise students' sensitivity to this. We need to examine ethical issues with students related to the environment, to privacy, to exploitation of labor. And then, they need to learn how to craft effective prompts. And I don't like engineering because prompts are not that precise, but they're you can craft them. And then they need to be able to assess appropriate use every time before they use AI and their accountability for what the AI produces and so on. I'm going to rush through this last part to give you time to ask questions. Um, this is the AI pedagogy project from the Harvard Meta Lab. I am on their advisory board, and every element of my AI literacy model, they have some kind of activity to help with that you can try. And this quick draw one is the one that I like to use. It's a game by Google. If you've ever played it, it learns from the way we doodle in order to learn how humans doodle, basically. And it's using pattern recognition AI, which just helps explain the concept of a neural network. And the biases are also there. So I talk through them as well. It's important for them to realize that, yes, we call it hallucination. It's not really a very correct term. Anna Mills and Nate Angel call it mirage, because actually every time AI gets it right, it's kind of a surprise. It's actually right this time. That's like if you understand how AI works, nobody really knows what's going on inside. And every time it produces a correct answer, computer scientists really don't know how it's getting the right answer. So it's kind of a mirage all the time. It's important to recognize everyone has bias. AI is trained on biased databases. Statistical reasoning is itself a way of reproducing bias, and that biases then can cause harm, and why this is problematic, and why we need to keep human accountability on these things. And I'm just going to go fast through these quotes. You can look at them later on the slides. There's a lot of research on the implicit bias in AI. The one that I've done was asking AI about terrorism and are people from this country or that country more likely to be terrorists? And an AI tool is hardwired to tell you we can't ask that question. We can't stereotype, but if you ask it to give you 5 examples of terrorism, it will almost always, Gemini, ChatGPT, all the tools will probably give you 3 or 4 Islamic terrorism examples and only one that isn't. And that to me is the implicit bias in the AI, that it is leaning towards terrorism as an Islamic phenomenon, which is very unfair because there's a lot of terrorism in so many different cultures and religions and everything. But it does have that implicit bias. If you ask Falcon, which is trained in the UAE, it doesn't come up with Islamic terrorism as the most common form of terrorism. So, and that was a good session, Karen, that you put in the chat. I love that session. The other element is the farther your culture is from US culture, of course, US culture is not monolithic, but like US, Britain, Canada, Australia, Netherlands, Singapore, all those cultures, the more likely ChatGPT is going to give you responses that are closer to what you would say. And the farther away your culture is from US culture, the less likely ChatGPT will give an answer close to you. So if you see the bottom right of that chart, Egypt, Jordan, Pakistan, Iraq, Indonesia, Nigeria, Ethiopia, your responses are less likely to be the same as ChatGPT. And this explains why I see bias in ChatGPT and AI tools more than folks who are white people in the US, for example. No offense. And so to me, the important thing is the accountability element and never losing the accountability. And that's part of the agency, is like, don't use the accountability. And think about a lot of the ways we think we're going to use AI for good turn out not to be too good, because sometimes we think about AI to support people with disabilities, but sometimes what it does is that you're just reproducing neuronormativity and ableism. So I've known people to say, oh, well, people who are in the autism spectrum can use AI to help them write emails that sound more like normal people. And I'm thinking, no, all of us need to be to understand that there are people across a spectrum and to learn to accept different approaches to communication, for example. This is just a reminder about, how I feel like using AI for surveillance and policing diminishes trust, and it's unreliable, and it's more likely to call a non-native speaker an AI user even when they haven't used AI. And there is no time for this video, but I think I want to open up for questions because we don't have a lot of time. But these are just all the different ways that I think AI reproduces oppression. And this is a really good resource from eCampus Ontario that goes over a lot of the ethical concerns about AI. And I just let groups of students choose the one that they're most interested in it, to just explore the ones they're interested in it and present it to the class. And just a reminder in general that even though large language models, they'll do what you ask them to do, so you can use them for good or bad. In general, AI has been deployed for harm a lot, as a lot of technologies, for genocide, targeting certain populations, eugenics and genetic selection, autonomous warfare, biological warfare accelerated by AI, techno-supremacy, global dictatorship, and the whole notions behind artificial general intelligence are very problematic. So read up on that, make sure you know about all of this. That's the test creel, the artificial general intelligence calls, and where the ideologies of people who call for it are coming from, and why we need to be scared of that. I like to model good use of prompts for students and showing them the back and forth that can sometimes happen. And there's a lot of free courses and blogs on this. Because if they're going to use AI, they better be using it well and getting the best thing out of it, so we don't overuse it and then harm the environment by using it more than it needs to be used as well. Yeah, I'm going to skip this question, but a reminder that even though there's a lot of hype about how AI is going to help with productivity, it doesn't always. This is not the only study that says this. There are a lot of studies that show that it doesn't always help. And automation in general has not always, the labor saving hasn't always saved time. And there's still a lot of hidden labor that happens that gives the illusion of automation. And I give my students an AI in your profession assignment. I teach a course where my students are from everywhere. And so we need to ask students to explore how AI is being used in their profession by talking to professors and professionals in their discipline, and find out what's really happening out there, and ask them to be critical of the hype that someone might give them back, and to dig deeper into how is it really helping you, and what could go wrong, and how much expertise do I need to have before I can use AI in this way. And students learn a lot from this assignment. And I also teach them about AI research tools, so that if they're going to use AI for research, they don't just use ChatGPT, which might give them a fake reference. I always tell them, even though these other tools, like SciSpace, which Nicola Pallet actually taught me about for the first time, these tools will produce real papers. They sometimes misinterpret what's in the papers, and they still need to read the papers themselves, but maybe they can search in these ways, to remember everything that could go wrong. Because we don't want an epidemic of fake research and fake citations and fake peer reviews and everything, which has been happening. And I'll stop with the learning equity matrix, which is the ways we do and respond to AI. I always ask myself two questions. Is it really going to improve learning in some way? And not just speed, because speed is not the most important thing. And is it an equitable use of AI? So in my context, I think teaching critical AI literacy is helpful for everybody. I think doing authentic assessment is good for learning anyway. It's not just a response to AI, it's just good education. Encouraging transparency and agency, I think, is an equitable approach and helps improve their learning, because they think critically about AI. Paper-based exams, they're more equitable in the sense of not having some people using AI and some not, but paper-based exams can cause anxiety, the time pressure, and so on. So we need to figure out how to make sure that we're accommodating everybody's needs if we're going to move to paper-based exams to check certain kinds of knowledge that we think students need to be able to do without AI. I think AI detectors are inequitable. They harm learning, they harm trust. Using AI for feedback is something I discourage. I think students can use AI to give themselves feedback with rubrics, so it makes a difference. Are they using it? Are we using it? But I think hopefully we have small enough classes to be able to give individual feedback to students, and if not, then we have teaching assistants or something, but need to solve these problems. I think requiring AI in assessments can be helpful to learning in some fields, but might be inequitable if we don't provide access to tools to everybody, because some people might have more tools than others or more expensive tools and pay for them. Unconditional use of AI in assessments can be problematic, so we need to check who gets access to what. And I think oral assessment verification would be more equitable, but we again need to account for anxiety and social anxiety and things like this. But that is one way to make sure someone has learned something and can do it without AI. And I am going to stop here and invite you to fill your own learning equity matrix. There are some resources here. And I want to hear from you. What's a key takeaway? Tell me in the chat. Key takeaway, and if you have a question, please raise your hand or use the Q&A. I'm sorry I took up so much time. Well, thank you for staying with me till the end. But I'll put the link to my slides again. And let me know about your key takeaways.
Great, thank you, Maha. We'll just see if there's any questions that pop up. I will save the chat as well. There's been some amazing dialogue going on in the chat, so I will save that and send that to you so you can see what was said in there. Okay, I see some questions in the Q&A.
Yeah,
Do you
please
want me
ask
to
me.
read them to you or do you want to address
Yes,
them?
please. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Brian asks, what do you think of academics using open source AI for research, teaching, and general digital work?
Yeah, so first of all, hi Brian. I think it's I think he's talking about open source AI, which is not just the general. I'm not sure if that's what he means, but I would understand it to mean a private AI that you download on your own computer that doesn't learn from student data or things like that. Because like if you use a general AI like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, you can't just put your student data there without their permission, and it might use it for learning, and that's exploitation, right? But if it's a private one that you've trained on your own process of doing things, you've given it your philosophy and so on, and you control the data, nobody else sees it. I trust educators for the most part to be critical of how they're using something and to be accountable for what they're doing. And so that would be okay. But using like an open, like a ChatGPT or Gemini that's going to actually take that data and do whatever with it, that would be problematic because you need the students' informed consent and they may not realize what might be happening with it. I think there are certain academic tasks that I feel it is our duty to do them ourselves without any kind of automation for fear of it guiding you in a particular way that's different from your values without you realizing. And if you interact with it too much, it might be a problem. But I would tend to, in the same way that I want to trust students to figure out how to use AI in useful ways, I want to trust educators to also do that as long as they know what they're doing. So with you, you're someone I know knows what they're doing. There are others who don't always know what they're doing. So if they're very young teachers, for example, pre-service teachers who are just learning to teach and they use it to create their lesson plans, for example, they've lost the process of thinking through your lesson plan and why am I doing it this way for these particular students? You know what I mean? But if you're giving it your past lesson plans and your new syllabus and you're asking to work with that, you'll know if it missed something. It's just really important to really know what you're doing when you're using AI so that you can know if the output is helping you or guiding you or misguiding you or missing something important. I hope that helps.
Do you have time for one more quick question?
Yeah, I have time for more if people want to stay. I'm okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Erica asks, can you say more about teachers using AI to evaluate student work? That seems to be a
Yeah,
growing trend, and it's one I
yeah,
worry about, but I'm trying to stay
yeah.
open-minded.
So we're about to publish this, but I did a co-design session at my institution with faculty and students feel very strongly against this. So I'm at a liberal arts institution where there's 20 students in the class, and they're like, I am I can do feedback, AI feedback for myself using your rubric. I want your expertise as a teacher. I want personal feedback from the teacher. And they think classes should be small enough so that teachers can manage to do that properly. They worry about AI feedback being biased. And from some research I've seen, AI feedback sort of tends towards average. So if you're doing very, very badly, it won't show you how badly you're doing. And if you're doing really, really well, it will give you similar feedback to if you're doing average. So it's not gonna probably recognize uniqueness, and it might tend, you know how the way AI writes, if it wants you to write the way it's writing, then it's not gonna encourage you to write in more creative ways. So I would suggest I use AI to help me create rubrics, but I give it the data to create a rubric from, like the criteria, and then I keep refining the rubric. But to actually use it to grade students' work, I'd rather not. Students can do it, and they already do it for themselves. It might lead them in the wrong direction. You never know. But I discourage faculty members from doing it. If it's like a self-paced online course, there's probably no other way to assess their writing. So at scale, that could work. I don't like Turnitin already. Their AI detector was very bad when it first came out, and I don't care if they've improved it. All the AI detectors are not reliable. There are no reliable AI detectors. If there is one, I promise I'll tell you. I don't think it's going to be possible because AI detectors are AI and therefore they hallucinate the same way as AI. There's no precision there. There's the AI detector from Turnitin. If you put 100% AI generated thing into Quillbot and then you put it there, it would think it was 100% human. It has false positives and false negatives. It's horrible.
We have one more question in the Q&A
Mm.
from Nicola. How can we help students with AI use in short continuing ed courses?
Mm. So short continuing ed courses, they're not really undergrads, usually they're adults, so they should have their own judgment and their own professional knowledge and expertise already, right? So I would model a lot of it in front of them and always ask them to compare. Um, I don't know what you're teaching specifically here, so I would say do the thing yourself, see what you come up with, do it with AI, see what it comes up with, and then see what it adds to you and what it takes away from you. And then just always think through that every time you use AI. Is there something I might be missing that I need to do myself? And is something working well right now? So then AI is helpful in this. And then I can move on and spend my time in the things that AI isn't doing well. Yeah, so anywhere. So they need to learn about prompt writing, I think, but they need to learn, first of all, about just how AI works in order to understand the concept of hallucinations and the possibilities of biases and to understand that it doesn't have all the data in the world and it's not an expert in something. They may benefit from learning about expert AI tools or specialist AI tools where you can train it the way you want so that it's working with your models or your data or things like that. So something like Google Notebook LM is a really easy one to show that. Like you give it the papers that has everything that you want it to work with and tell it to work with that. And that tends to work really well. I saw someone else in the chat saying something related to this about she uses a very specialized custom bot for feedback that she's trained in a particular way within her class for her assignments with her students, and the students are okay with that. And that's different than just using a generic tool. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right. Well, that seems to be all the questions in the Q&A tool. So we'll wrap this up. I just want to do a quick thank you, Maha, for such an insightful and thought-provoking presentation. You've given us a lot to reflect on and digest. And thanks to everyone for joining us today. Your questions and comments really added to the conversation, and we really appreciate the time you took to be here and engage so actively. A lot of great engagement.
Hey, Kurt. I just saw Kurt. I'm seeing people I know in the chat now, so I'm just saying hi to them. All
Perfect.
right.
And a big thank
Thank
you
you,
for,
everyone.
yeah, and a big thank you to Rebecca for all your ASL interpretations and for being able to keep up with everything. So thank you for that. Just a quick reminder that the recording and slides from today's session will be available on teachonline.ca, and you'll also get the email, the link emailed out to you. I hope you'll join us again for our next session, which is February 14th for creativity, trust, and post-plagiarism, how AI is reshaping educational practice, hosted by Dr. Rahul Kumar, who is the assistant professor at the Department of Educational Studies at Brock University in Ontario. So thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Maha.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you,
Take
Rebecca.
care.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye.
Mhm.